So I guess, pardon me, we should call this news from America. Well, the United States of America. I have to express my regrets because at times I've said, well, my dad really didn't like America, but he did. And it's really complicated because when his parents were immigrants, the old country was so much better than America. They looked down on people, they would label people, they would call them, certain words. But that's, I realized that was his upbringing and their upbringing. So am I the generation that just decides not to judge, and yet I don't scapegoat, and yet I feel so much, as a Christian, am I allowed to say I'm a victim? Okay, no, you're not allowed to say that. Because you're the victimizer, you're not the victim. Yeah, this pop psychology crap. Slowly, mothers were being undermined. Slowly, very slowly. I've been in sessions where people declare, I hate my mother, I want to have nothing to do with her. Like, nobody declares they hate their father and want nothing to do with him, right? Because that's disrespectful. I mean, yeah, I know we're going to make exceptions. Well, maybe your mother's a serial killer or your father's a serial killer. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's kind of like a very rare thing. For example, I'm not a serial killer. And, going back to the 1970s when divorce became so fashionable and who jumped on the bandwagon? Why, my own mother jumped on the bandwagon of divorce? I mean, as smart as she was, how foolish, how foolish. I mean, for example, my dad was already spending his entire week in Cleveland working at the university, and so you only had to put up with him over the weekend. And still, you choose to have an affair with a teacher coworker? You break up the marriage and you destroy my life? I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe you're in purgatory now because you never ever said you were sorry and you made a mistake. And so is that why I turned out not to be ideal? Why I turned out to be less than ideal? Do I have to twist myself into some sort of insane pretzel? After I was married, I was really liberal. I had a very liberal outlook about people's lifestyles. I mean, who doesn't have a gay uncle? In my social class, everybody has a gay uncle who's actually very rich and left you absolutely nothing. Well, apparently my father was in charge of dividing up his estate and, divvied up the cash to all the siblings. I didn't get a dime. Not a dime, not a single dime. Well, not that I was entitled, but yeah. Yeah, I know. And then this whole thing of progressivism within Christianity attacking us and just waylaying us, if you know what I mean. It's really no good, folks. It's really no good to have an outward form of religion, right? Even Jesus said you're like whitewashed tombs, but inside you're filled with dead men's bones. That's what he told the Pharisees. So I'm not anti-Jewish, but, Jesus was a Jew. But he was also God. If you don't accept that he was God, then he's just a guy that had a different attitude. If you accept that he was God in the flesh, it really changes everything. So I grew up in a home where, yeah, I guess it was a broken home. And women get so dependent on the government. It's not just the black people anymore, because black people used to have two-parent households at a much higher percentage than they do now. But when Lyndon Johnson ushered in the social welfare, he said, we'll have Democrat voters for life. And you know what? The Republicans were the ones who fought against slavery and saved the republic. But everything seemed to have been turned upside down during the 1960s with the civil rights movement. And it's great. I mean, I can't understand. We know that a very famous man was a communist, and yet I thought he was doing the right thing. But people aren't, it seems to me, generations later, or decades later, people are not satisfied with having equal rights. I voluntarily took a course in Africa. Well, that makes you such a great white person. I don't know, how white am I, I'm not as white as the driven snow. Neither is the most recent Snow White. She's a bit, not so white. Anyway, I digress. I took African American literature because I really wanted to be an open-minded person. A child graduating from high school in the year 1990. I was only 17. Well, she was just 17, if you know what I mean. Well, I can't say that the way I looked was way beyond compare. My parents put me in kindergarten early because they didn't want to have to pay a babysitter, and they didn't really have Head Start, and maybe if they had Head Start, they wouldn't have qualified because of their income level, and they didn't want my grandmother watching me because, she was kind of asleep at the wheel a lot of times, I felt, how many times did I fall down the stairs? Boom, 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 and like, well, I guess she's just kind of like relaxing in another room, with a substance. Fine. Yeah. So hence we're gonna have your intelligence tested. You're gonna go into kindergarten at age 4. It's like I wasn't really ready to go into kindergarten at age 4. They try to put boys in school too early too. Well, sometimes they say, no, he's just not emotionally mature enough to enter kindergarten. Wait until he's 6 years old, because they don't want the hyperactive little boys like my brother was. At 4 years old, I'm walking in basically inner city Cleveland to a school, and and I have to go to, it's a really old brick building. It looks like an institution, of any sort. If you're going to be punished, this is the institution that tells you, yes, you're being punished for being a child, for being inconvenient. You have to climb up to the top floor to go to kindergarten, and your teacher is really mean, and she has granny glasses, like Miss Grizzlepuss in SpongeBob, that episode. Just mean, just a mean old lady, just mean, didn't like me. I was afraid of that woman. And then in the second grade, the first grade. What? Okay, oh yes, the first grade. Well, we moved to a trailer park, but it was actually a really nice trailer park on a golf course. And I had the best teacher, Mrs. Plusquellic in Worcester, Ohio. She was just so young, youthful, vibrant, enthusiastic, nice, kind, and we learned about the letter people, and then in the middle of first grade, suddenly we need to move again. My mother said, "You're being bullied on the playground, aren't you?" I said, "No, Mom, I'm not being bullied. I had a best friend, and you just do not give a goddamn fuck, do you? You only care about yourself, whatever. I had a best friend named Timothy. We would run around the playground pretending we were superheroes. We would tie our jacket sleeves around our throats and pretend we were superheroes, and you just didn't give a goddamn fuck. And I'm sorry to use the salty language. I mean, don't do that to your children. Do not move them from pillar to post like a little pony, because it's going to mess them up. Not only was it, we moved to like an area that was a lot colder and more ancient and dark. I mean, the school building was ancient and dark. The teacher hated children. She hated them. She especially hated me. I was so afraid of her, I hid under my desk from her. So, oh, well, I had a lot worse than you, so stop. But I was demonstrating that I can empathize with maybe what you endured. Maybe what you endured was a lot worse. But don't think that I'm this privileged person. This woman, she must have dyed her hair black. She was like 50-something. Her hair is jet black. That's not natural. It's just the meanest, crankiest old bat you ever could imagine. I had to endure that. After having the most wonderful, like a tennis player, blonde person with a beautiful, gleaming white smile, a young teacher that loved children, then I got this old person that just really had an axe to grind, that hated children, and that's why they went into the profession, just to torture them, But the rest of the teachers at that school that I had were actually really good. It's just you had to pass the first grade test. And in second grade, the girl had been bullying me almost the entire time, and the teacher just kind of turned a blind eye. This girl is bullying me. Well, you're writing your fours wrong. You're making a pointed four instead of an open four. That's not the right. She just bullied me, and the teacher just turned a blind eye. I'm telling you, that teacher was really evil. She's probably in hell now. Well, she became my best friend in the second grade, and in the third grade, and the fourth grade, and in the fifth grade. And then, oh, you dropped the bomb on me, baby. I used to turn on the radio and listen to that. It's like, yeah, that's exactly when my mother dropped the bomb and said, your father and I are getting a divorce. Well, the guy lives in Cleveland for like the entire week. You can't tolerate him for like a couple of days and not violate your vows. That you made vows at the altar when you got married. I saw the pictures of you. They were throwing rice and everything. Your pure white dress, and you just what you did. It's like the consequences are so unimaginably terrible for committing adultery. But I'm saying, I know that your family upbringing was not the best. I heard about stuff after you passed away, and my dad told me some things that, oh wow, he told me some pretty salty things about your family, how there's problems, with the morality there. I was thinking, Dad, I really didn't want to hear this. I really didn't want to know this. However, I think about my mother's upbringing. Maybe that's why she didn't turn out to be the ideal mother. And so, I think she might be in purgatory, if not in heaven. Some people, I think they're in hell. Some people, I think possibly they're in purgatory. There has to be a purgatory. There has to be a place where you can really be purified. That's what I think. And who cares anyway? If I believe in Jesus, I know I'm going to heaven. I know I'm getting raptured. So, even if I'm wrong about purgatory, I never told you had to believe in it either, did I? I can think of some relatives just really relatives that just didn't live a good life. Maybe they're just watching me on a TV screen in purgatory and saying, yes, It really wasn't our fault, and we're so sorry. I'm like, okay, just wait for the rapture. Maybe you'll get out of purgatory when Jesus comes back. But the unkindest cut of all is, I do have a son who's old, he's like in his 30s. I don't blame you for not being a normal person, but I don't think you're a very good influence. And I say the same thing to my daughters. I don't blame you for having been hoodwinked, trapped by a progressive theology. But I don't think that you're a good influence on my younger children. They sidled in there and they just, for example, don't tell everybody's business, but yeah, for example, and then censored, but I know. I think of that Eagles song, Victim of Love. I used to listen to all of my mother's 8 tracks, 33 RPMs, and 45s, and she complained, well, I had this Disney collection of 78 records, and you broke them, and she never let me forget that I broke the records. It's like, well, I guess I'm special. I broke the records, I just felt so guilty. It's like, I don't even remember doing that. Was I like 3 years old and you were off in a bar somewhere with Dad, and you just left me alone and I cracked the records? Like, are you going to blame me? I'm only 2 or 3 years old. Yeah, really. But after having, I don't know how you could even ever consider yourself to be a Christian, daughters. Well, leave the old man alone. Well, because I will call every 3 months over to where he lives with his grandmother, and he says, I'm going to get a restraining order against you. You'll fart. Maybe your grandmother should get a restraining order against you. You're taking advantage of that woman, and you're taking your younger siblings into the effing ghetto. What kind of a example are you as an older brother? And I have to say, I am so sorry if you didn't have a good, close relationship with your father. Please stop blaming the mother, because I didn't have anything to do with it. I never wanted you to not be close to your father, but if you're not close to your father, you're going to resent your mother, and you might be same-sex attracted. Let's just be honest. Look what happened to one of my uncles, Like I said, everybody has a gay uncle. I said that about 15 minutes ago. I saw pictures of him. He was an altar boy. He looked so cherubic and angelic. And my grandmother used to keep pictures of him on her dresser. And she lived in Cleveland on the west side, and it would get really hot in the summer, and she only had an air conditioner in one room, and sometimes when I would stay overnight, she would allow me to actually go into her bedroom, the only room that had air conditioning, and I would lie on her bed, and it was just such a nice, quiet, peaceful place. And I saw Cousin Connie, I saw Uncle Otto. Those were the 2 pictures that she had. And then, of course, I saw Aunt Clara, how beautiful she was, and she was the class valedictorian. And in fact, my dad would often say, I was a bad boy for the Cleveland Indians. He was a bad boy for the Cleveland Indians. And he won an essay contest, but his sister wrote it for him. His sister wrote the essay. He couldn't have written it. Yeah. But he's still, it used to be the Cleveland Indians, but now it's the Guardians. I'm sorry, we have to be progressive. You're just going to erase Native Americans from history entirely. I mean, that's what progressivism is doing. It's just erasing the fact that we have Native Americans. Or we did initially. Now, are they all on little casino reservations or something? Yeah, that's not good. Come on. What is a guardian? It sounds like basically it's just kind of like a fallen angel. We have guardian angels. Like, Chief Wahoo is racist. Well, let the Native Americans vote. Most of them would say, let's keep Chief Wahoo. Because, every, what do you want to say? I mean, could we have developed Chief Wahoo into Prince Joseph, who was also a Native American? Could we have made him less cartoonish and less satirical and made him a noble character? We could have done that. But no, the white people say, you can't have that. And here's another sad thing. My father was director of property control at the Cleveland State University. And he would come home every weekend so stressed out because the black people are trying to kick all the white people out. He says, I've got like a price on my head. My dad was, he was a complicated person, but first he hires a white blonde lady, and then she quits and goes to work at a chemical factory, and then calls and begs to get her job back. And she says, it smells so terrible, I'm getting terrible headaches. He's like, sorry, you quit. That's it. Because that's how Dad was, It's like, you made that decision, And then he hires a black lady who was just super, she was just the nicest person. Of course, you don't know 100% of her story. She almost became his work spouse, I think. She kind of was his emotional support. But after she was not working for him anymore, there was... Well, I don't want to go too fast forward. The thing was, there were black people that just wanted to get rid of all the white men in the institution because they saw them as the oppressors. And so they tried to get his secretary to admit, oh, he's a big racist, and he's a jerk, and he mistreats you. And she was like so loyal to him. She said, no, he's not. He's not, This stressed out my dad so much that he had to quit his job early. Listen, folks, if he had stuck around for even one more year, I could have had my college education paid for free. But because they harassed him and because he was just so nervous and anxious about it, he did take an early retirement. But, and then I can't even go to college for free because these racist jerks harassed my father. Because they didn't like his, they had an axe to grind. Well, he didn't ever do anything bad to anybody. I'll tell you a story right now. The truth is going to come out. When I stayed overnight at my grandmother's, I did when I was a younger child, before I became too fat and pimply and ugly. I was invited to stay overnight quite a lot. But not with my cousin Jennifer. I wish, we had been able to stay together, but however, that was not the case. My grandmother loved to talk on the phone, and she would often talk in a foreign language that I couldn't make heads nor tails of. It sounded like, my mother says, oh, that's the Low German. Like, whatever, it could be Bavarian, I don't know. It's Bayerisch. I couldn't make heads nor tails of it. When I started learning German, I said, Kleine Kinder? She says, oh, Kleine Kinder. She doesn't know how to speak German. It's She's got like a pigeon form of German she's speaking. She, yeah. And anyway, don't want to be mean. But I overheard her as I'm a little girl lying in bed. And it was just so beautiful, that it was almost like heaven staying over at her house. It was like SpongeBob's grandmother. I know she probably had health problems, but everything was so tidy and neat and clean. I did get bit by her dog one time. Never mind. She talked about Willy, which would be my dad, William. She called him Willy because she always pronounced the W as a V. I don't know what other Willis she would have been talking about, because I told my dad about this. He says, "Oh no, that wasn't me." But I'm not sure I believe him. He said, one time he was trying to pick up his girlfriend, and he was trying to take her on a date, and he got turned around and he went into the wrong neighborhood. He went into this wrong section of town. And then suddenly I'll drop the accent. I'm sorry that, I love accents, by the way. I'm not trying to make fun of you. I was just approximating the accent. Suddenly he drives to the wrong neighborhood, and he's surrounded by a bunch of young black men, and they beat him up almost to the point of death, and he only escapes with his very life. He drives away bloodied and bruised. He was just trying to pick up, I guess, my mom, Kathy, for a date. And he got the living shit beat out of him by a bunch of people that just hated white people. Now, come on, folks. As I said, I took a course in African American literature voluntarily. And that teacher was he was just like a super duper nice man. He says, everybody automatically gets an A in this course. I'm like, I feel a little twinge of conscience. Well, that's pretty liberal, but it's not evil. I think that he was a very open-minded, fair-minded human being, but there were some people that came into that classroom and they're like, you see these light-skinned people, they really act very aggressively anti-white because they want to prove they're black. It's like this really beautiful girl with light skin, yellow skin, a yaller gal. She's just spouting all this Malcolm X kind of stuff. And she's just very aggressive and very angry. I'm like, you're beautiful. You're going to college. You have a guaranteed A. Why are you so angry? Well, if I could talk to her, but can I fast forward to years later? After I was married, I started attending a Baptist church on the west side of Columbus. My grandmother and my mother lived on the west side of Cleveland. However, my husband's parents lived on the west side of Columbus. People seem to get along there okay, but it's definitely the inner city. Because people will not move. You should be moving out to the suburbs. Some old people are just stubborn. I'm never moving. I'm fine moving. I would say if you were a responsible grandson, Johnny, you would get that house sold and get you and your grandmother to a safe apartment in Dublin, a nice neighborhood where your sisters live. Why do you want to put up with this inner city garbage, like crack pipes lying around everywhere? But, my grandmother would stubbornly refuse to leave. after my grandfather died because they had emigrated. And they had bought that house in, say, the 1930s or something, you know. And all of a sudden, all these thugs just, I mean, it's just thuggery everywhere. And it's becoming kind of trashy. And one day, these black youths break in. My grandmother's like 70-something years old. They break in and they call her a bitch and they intimidate her. They steal, but they don't kill her. They don't do anything to her that's that bad, you know. So thank God for that. She had no choice but to move out of that house, and it's just really sad because I remember being in Nazareth, not Nazareth Towers, that was somebody else's grandmother. She was in something akin to Nazareth Towers. Like, last time I saw her, she complained, you know, your cousin, she drives to work every day, she never visits me. I'm sorry, it seems like you seem to have a really nice life and a very spacious apartment. And, you know, living in Columbus, traveling to Cleveland, it's a pretty long trip. I think that the lady died from loneliness. I really think so. You know, sometimes people just die from loneliness. Same thing happened to my grandmother. Originally, after her husband died, my mom's mother moved in with us just very briefly. My dad, we had space for her to move in. But my dad basically just didn't want her there because he didn't like her very much. So they put her in like one apartment, and then she calls my mom and says, there's drug dealers here. I don't want to live in this apartment. These people are dealing drugs, you know. She didn't really sound like that. And then they move her to another facility, and then she dies. It's like, yeah, it's just, you know. And my parents got her trailer. They just kind of like got the trailer. Then they sold it. And there was another person that it was deeded to another person, and they didn't care. And then my aunt recanted, oh no, they didn't really sell it without my permission. You're a big fat liar. You know, you always will be. Stop lying, else you're not going to go to heaven. Again, another very nice trailer park. I mean, you could see like flamingos walking around. It wasn't bad, but my parents had a problem with gambling. You know? And they had so many credit cards. And I took on that tendency early on in life. I had so many different credit cards, I had to keep shuffling them. And folks, yeah. You have to pay the piper, you know? Gonna have to do it at some point. You know, you're living on borrowed time. And so they would desperately gamble, and my dad would complain, you know, your mother, she every time she goes on that gambling boat, she loses all the money. Because my mother apparently didn't have good luck. And apparently, like, a bunch of senior citizens, they were on the gambling boat, and the boat sank, and, like, a lot of them died. Yeah, that's the Gulf of America. Yeah. I would say have nothing to do with gambling if I were you. But also, what's your original point? Well, the progressive Christianity is really causing a lot of confusion. I mean, for example, we were going to join this church. It was a Lutheran church. And there's a guy there. He was later fired, but he's like, you know, I go to bars, and I really try to engage people in bars. I'm like, yeah, I wish I could do that. I tried that one time and everybody thought I was like a complete creeping weirdo. They're like, are you trying to pick up, are you a prostitute? A man can go to a bar and have a conversation. I would love to have a conversation with people that aren't so uptight and anxious and angry. You know, a lot of people that go to bars are pretty laid back. But like I said, I tried it one time. One time was like, I don't know how many years ago. It's like, I'll never... You're so misogynist. I'm not there to like... I'm not a prostitute. Why can't it be like an English pub where you can go there, an Irish pub, and you can just be gemütlich, which is German, you know? You can't just talk to people and have a nice time. And how many churches have I been to where you can't have a nice time with these people because they're all... I remember, I think it was Memorial Day weekend, we sang God Bless America, and I stood up in this hoity-toity church in suburbia, basically in Mennonite country. I put my hand on my heart because I thought, you know, when you pledge allegiance to the flag, you put your hand on your heart. And we sang, I think it was God Bless America. I looked around. I'm standing up. I have my hand on my heart, and I'm standing up. And everybody else is just not, nobody has their hand on their heart. Nobody gives a goddamn fuck about America. It's just like, these people, wow, I'm telling you. Well, there's something not quite right in American churches these days. And another thing, you know, pierced ears. My mother said, you know, it's unsanitary to get your ears pierced, and really, you shouldn't. My mother always wore clip-on earrings, and that's so painful. When you wear these earrings, it's just so painful. Like, after a while, it's like your earlobes are throbbing. She says, our earlobes are too thick. We can't get our ears pierced. Do you trust the people who are just like doing this like surgery on you? Like, there could be invasive agents, you know, just going right into your bloodstream. You could get hepatitis of any type. You just like, well, you know, and that same thing for the tattoos. It's going into the bloodstream. Why are you doing that? Not to condemn anybody, because I've seen people that actually look like they fell into a tackle box, and they're just really the nicest people in the world. Like, just overlook my tackle box injury. Oh, I mean, really. But my mother said, don't ever get your ears pierced. So after I was married, I got my ears pierced at the mall. When there used to be a mall. It was this very nice young African-American lady, or you could say Black American, because she wasn't really from Africa. And she's super nice, and she's wearing gloves, and then this guy comes up to her and says, hey, here's my phone number, you know, like gives her the phone number, and I'm like, you just made this whole process very unsanitary because you took that paper and then you pierced my other ear. But, you know, I'm not dead, so I'm okay. And, you know, that one earlobe it's a little crooked. It's very hard to put the earrings through. Do you have loose earlobes or tethered earlobes? Chimpanzees have tethered earlobes. No, shush. Okay, I'll be quiet about that. I want to make you feel ashamed of your earlobes. And I have these lovely earlobes. I mean, they're just so squishy, like if you squish them, it's like if you want a squishy, you got it right there. So sometimes I wear earrings, sometimes I don't. You know, when old ladies wear earrings for too many years, their earlobes start to droop, so that doesn't look very good. I bought earrings the other day that I guess they were supposed to be for like people who had their nose pierced because they're just so small. I was like, I can't even put these on. Like my earlobes are too thick. Well, duh. It's for people who got their nose pierced or their cartilage pierced. Oh, I didn't really know. Okay. Oh no. People that have small noses. People that have small noses. They're such a minority in the white community because the Anglo-Saxons, actually, if you look at their helmets, they had to have they had to make a beak to protect their noses because they had very noses that would protrude. And they're very pointy. What's wrong with that? I don't know. But the basic thing is, I was just wanting to complain about my daughters, how they're not good people and they're very terrible. And whatever you're telling to your counselors and your friends, you are 10 times worse. The Bible says, judge not, lest you be judged. Whatever you accuse other people of being, you are exactly that. You are even worse than I am. So, reject the progressive Jesus. Please. Do it now, before it's too late. Amen.